Anarchy Online, one of the most complicated sci-fi MMOs available on the market. Oh my god. Yet it's also one of the deepest MMORPGs of all time. How do I stand up again? Yet, before Star Wars Galaxy fans begin a revolt to my detriment, what makes Anarchy Online so great is also its biggest downfall. Even still, some believe it's the greatest sci-fi MMORPG ever made. So let's explore this MMO that's older than some watching this video. Anarchy Online was developed when MMOs were world's first and game's second, when community was at the center of game design principles instead of cash shot monetization or player retention schemes, a topic I've previously covered. Released in 2001, the same year in which Dark Age of Camelot and EverQuest Luckland expansion debuted, Anarchy Online explored the grim realities of a future world in which magic and technology intermingle in a chaotic dance, whose tone harmonizes with the Phrygian Warhammer 40k than the bright festive lights of Star Wars. It's this direction that is palpable at every corner. A disregarded subway, home to addicts and forgotten citizenry, contrasted with the wealth and opulence of those who live above in their towering skyscrapers, or the remains of a sacrifice laid bare as a foreboding signal to adventurers about to enter the forlorn temple. Of course, there are sea monsters and dragons, yet these coexist in a way that's metaphorically appropriate, since in Anarchy Online, juxtapositions in the extreme are commonplace. A bunny? And a butterfly. And thankfully, for new or returning adventurers alike, there exists an extremely passionate and knowledgeable community ready to guide and help. Vescati? Oh, hey, thanks. While not as popular as other old-school MMOs, Anarchy Online still maintains a dedicated player base, Discord, subreddit, and activity on YouTube. Plus, for those interested, Kalos2 is the most prolific publisher and streamer of Anarchy Online, so check out his impressive catalog. Naysayers may point out that its population is a far cry from its golden age, yet I have experienced far more natural multiplayer in Anarchy Online than my time in WoW and Black Desert Online combined. To this point, population is a red herring if real socialization is important. Those who play are friendly, helpful, and eager to share their favorite MMO with those who brave the wilds of a classic MMORPG. With that said, if you are interested in Anarchy Online's decline over the years, I recommend Nerdslayer's coverage on his Death of a Game series, even if this MMO is technically still breathing. Speaking of the wilds, the amount of complexity a player encounters in Anarchy Online's tutorial is more than some gamers would experience in the entirety of Star Wars: The Old Republic. For example, experience is like a currency. You must explicitly invest into specific skills, each of which is attuned to various degrees to each class. Of course, various items are associated with certain combinations of skills, and since there's only so much experience to earn, you must divvy it up strategically. This applies to magic too, called nanotechnology in Anarchy Online. The system reminds me of a mix between Rubies of Eventide and Asheron's Call. The game is deep and rewards a player's clever thinking. In fact, this honoring of a player's intelligence has been a major reason why some players continue to play AO instead of its competitors. Yet, experience allotment is only one dimension of character building. While separate videos could be made covering each class, including the class that can become other classes, a unique feature of Anarchy Online is its equipment system, or rather, systems. You have 4 interrelated ways in which to customize your character, not including buffs or other modifiers. This sounds overwhelming and an artifact of overcomplicated design of the early millennium, and you're not wrong for sharing that thought. But one of these tabs is for implants that an NPC surgically attaches to your character's limbs, providing buffs. But you can stack multiple of these, and you can incrementally keep adding stronger and stronger implants until you can wear in-game equipment even as a noob. You are thus not railroaded into a fixed progression path. Your power correlates to your ingenuity. This is just a drop in the bucket too, yet is one example as to the depth available in Anarchy Online. Yet with depth comes difficulty, but not the punitive type. Most creatures can be soloed reasonably quickly, and depending on how clever you are, you may be able to take on multiple foes at once. Lots of cultists. Lots of cultists. Oh, yep. Okay, yep, okay, yep. That's what I meant to do. But you have to be on your toes because the difference between solo friendly and group required can be a stairwell. These difficulty spikes remind me of progressing through Unrest in classic EverQuest. It requires experience to navigate accordingly, as you cannot simply expect to win every encounter. Nothing is guaranteed, and it's this unknown that keeps the gameplay exciting. But these moments of hardship encourage cooperation. Grouping comes naturally while playing, even from the earliest moments of the tutorial. In fact, most of my time was spent in groups, which means if you're looking for a solo-oriented yet group-encouraged MMO, you can't go wrong with Anarchy Online. But as some commenters are sure to point out, AO is not without its issues. Its so-called new client, which has been in beta longer than my daughter's been alive, is still buggy. To run the older yet functional client optimally requires third-party tools, and Funcom has all but abandoned development of the MMO, as its last public update was years ago. Last yet not the least, the new tutorial is actually quite confusing, which is fine because I'll walk you through it. To the curious, I already have 2 episodes covering the newbie experience that you can watch, yet I'll catch you up. This is in fact Anarchy Online's 3rd version of a starting tutorial. The first were called Backyards, faction-specific tutorial zones that are still available. The second was an island on which your shuttlecraft crashed. This new incarnation is Arete, or Arete. While it technically introduces players to most mechanics in Anarchy Online, it does a terrible job teaching them. Regardless, after creating a character, you begin in a junkyard, where you learn to interact with and use items, haggle with NPCs, fight and loot mobs, invest experience, and complete quests. This sounds ordinary, but Anarchy Online is anything but. In order to leave the pit, we need to convince the exit guard to let us out, which can be done either through a bribe or by obtaining an ID, mostly through illicit means. Anarchy Online thus preserves the RPG in the MMO, since you have a choice as how to complete the tutorial. In fact, its writing underscores classical utilitarian dilemmas in that you may have a good motive for doing a given action, even if it produces an ultimately unethical outcome. Regardless, we left off confronting our 3rd boss, the first being an aggressive droid and the other a tyrannical boss. We're also in a group, necessary for the difficulty of this open world encounter. You can see that combat is classically extended, yet not slow. But our tank flees attempting to save his life, leaving us behind with the critter and its spawn. Lesnot is a futuristic necromancer droid utilizing pet class, and I'm an adventurer, which seems to be Anarchy Online's version of EverQuest's ranger. But while our teammate manages to bring down the trash bug, I still succumb to my injuries. Death penalties exist in AO, although for now, they're tolerable. You lost 10,000 experience. Okay, so that was more than that entire hunting expedition. That's nice. The real reason why we're in the corner of the sewer is to retrieve a stolen suit of armor, because if we can return it to its rightful owner, we'll learn who can help us escape. Continuing the trend of securing your ID card, she exchanges the item for a name. It's the next person in our quest line. Now, unlike WoW, in which quest icons are placed above an NPC's head, in Anarchy Online, you need to personally locate them without obvious visual clues. But this is where the RPG component really shines. She asks for her credit card that we looted in an earlier episode. Had I not returned it here, I could have sold it to buy my way out of the tutorial early. However, by being benevolent and giving it back, she gave us a medical suit. You can see me fumbling through the 4 character UIs, yet by equipping this item, we'll be better able to use implants, one of Anarchy Online's best features. Although expensive, you can use these to either round out your build or target a specific stat in order to wield a weapon generally reserved for higher levels. It's an incredibly flexible system, although the game does a poor job teaching you how to use it. In short, it leverages Anarchy Online's crafting system, if you can even call it that. Each implant requires a source and something to which it can attach, like an arm or leg extension. Once fused, you can then equip the implant to its area on the body. This is effectively another layer of armor, and you can keep upgrading them as you see fit. It's like Kenchi's limb replacement system, except in Anarchy Online, you get to keep your appendages too. You can also earn your first mount in Arete too. A NPC by the name of Shady Guy convinces you that his car's been stolen, and all he has left is an old beater. You attack the driver with the crowbar and return the vehicle. You then realize that you committed Grand Theft Auto because this vehicle never belonged to Shady Guy in the first place. He simply used your naivety to get you to get it for him. But you do get a flying car out of the job, which was his old beater. Life isn't fair nor just, and Anarchy Online captures this reality beautifully. But Arete is more than a junkyard. Past the infested lake, roam local wildlife amidst violent storms. There's even an alien craft in which you can explore. But as you are ready to leave, you can also choose a faction. You can become an employee of Omnitech, the mega corporation who leases this planet for mining operations. Or the Clan, which is really an umbrella term for a group of loosely connected groups struggling against both each other and Omnitech, and the neutrals, those who don't wish to pick a side. There are in-game effects to your choice, such as decreased prices at vendors or various armor sets being available, although ultimately it is a role-playing decision with little overarching effect on the trajectory of your character. Neither side is truly good nor evil, and even the neutrals are stuck in the middle of a never-ending conflict. But once you're out of Arete, your journey has really just begun. Even for an older MMO, this hub is always busy with players. The first open-world dungeon to explore is the subway. It is a sprawling labyrinth for players up to level 25. The world building is top-notch, as you explore a once vibrant mercantile area, now condemned to be the discarded underbelly of a corporate headquarters. It's this lived-in feel that makes exploring in Anarchy Online so rewarding, as each mob in each location makes sense in its own twisted way. As you progress, you ramp up from fighting a once beloved pet, a simple mugger, workers on strike, STEM fiends, read between the lines, failed science experiments, to the four bosses, Eumenides, Virgil Aeneid, Blood Creeper, and Abmouth Supremus. Those who have studied the classics immediately sense the complicated references to justice and the justification of violence, yet in this case from the perspective of the mobs themselves, not the players. Anarchy Online is a future world of anarchy, classical Greek for no ruling authority, and you feel it at every turn. Related to the topic of power, even though I was not able to experience it, players have praised Anarchy Online's unique territorial PvP system. A veteran described it as level-protected zones that inspired armies of twink characters, leading to phenomenal PvP. Unfortunately, others have also mentioned rampant cheating, leading to AO's current state of PvP being overrun with hackers. Regardless, others still engage in PvP content, so there's still fun to be had. However, despite my favorable impressions of Anarchy Online, you may be thinking, why then isn't AO more popular? Why should I play it? These are interesting questions with unfortunate answers. While veterans will fill in the blanks in the comments, there are a few considerations. Even though Anarchy Online was released during the classical golden age of the genre, its current iteration is anything but. Since Funcom's attention shifted to Age of Conan, then to The Secret World, then Secret World Legends, then Conan Exiles, and now their Dune project. Anarchy Online has fallen into the shadowy abyss of developmental priority, since little to no attention has been given to this virtual world. It has effectively become a stagnant pool of water, filled with all sorts of imbalances and problematic pH levels. It must feel unfair to be a long-term player of Anarchy Online, because you can fondly remember when fresh water used to pour through the pond, bringing rich nutrients and pushing out the filth. But over time, more and more corrosion stayed, while the upstream river dried out. No updates, fewer new players, and all the variously layered systems and inflationary economy have produced an ironically alien environment compared to what it was 15 years ago. Other MMOs have faced similar issues, and is a reason why popular private servers exist to recapture some of the magic that the original experience provided. City of Heroes, Project 1999, and Star Wars Galaxy's Emulator all have around 1,000 concurrent online players, whereas Anarchy Online may have a few dozen. These virtual worlds found a new pond to call home, although they had to build and maintain it themselves. Moreover, beyond an infamously bad launch, another reason why Anarchy Online's popularity has struggled is due to its unique strength, its overwhelming depth. This problem is best summarized by the complexity versus complication ratio. Classic EverQuest, for example, was incredibly complex, but it was staggeringly simple. Mechanics were basic, yet they could layer in ways that were surprising, unexpected, and dynamic. Plus, most systems were not introduced to players quickly. We slowly eased into them, often by mistakes. Oh, you're supposed to cast Harmony before you try to pull a single mob from a group? Anarchy Online, while still having complexity, also has the cognitive burden of complication. By complication, I mean the unnecessary cost of a player to spend in order to engage in a game's complexity. For example, let's compare equipping items or learning a spell. In EverQuest, there are 4 checks. Is it compatible with your religion, class, size, and race? If yes, you can wear it. The vast majority of the time, this answer is immediately obvious because you made the choice to be a plate-wearing dark elf Shadow Knight who worships Innerok. So there are 4 dimensions of complexity, yet there's little to no complication engaging with the system. Spells are even simpler. Can your class learn it? Are you at the appropriate level? Done. But in Anarchy Online, there are 10 categories containing a total of 67 separate skills or attributes. Any item or nanotechnology may require not only one or more, but also a certain degree of training in each. Since the max level for a skill is up to 600, then the total possible dimensions for equipping an item is over 5,400, notwithstanding faction, character level, and other contributors. These requirements begin being enforced at the very beginning, which is why if you've watched my Anarchy Online series, you may have seen me struggle to understand why I can't learn skills or equip items that I figured I should have been able to wield or understand. EverQuest has many skills too, yet to my knowledge, no items require any proficiency. So 4 versus 5,400. Now, someone could rebut that we could consolidate the 5,400 dimensions into one. In other words, into a single character skills requirement. But even if we gave this allowance, it still does not solve the increased complication of having to check your character whenever you have to invest more points to equip an item or learn a nanotechnology. While I love the complexity of the system, the complication of its implementation makes it more annoying than fun, which is never a good game design principle to follow. But even in its current state, Anarchy Online has a strong draw. The music is engrossing, the atmosphere gripping, and the world feels honest. The gameplay narrative flows smoothly as you're just another cog in the machine, likely fodder for either the megacorp or infighting clans. You're no hero unless you earn the reputation, but the game doesn't care about the reputation, only other players, which is what true good MMO storytelling should foster. It's this brutal, transparent, unapologetic interpretation of our reality with which many players resonate. There's a strange degree to which you can trust your experience in Anarchy Online, even if betrayal lurks at every turn. But this commitment to a dark aesthetic doesn't last forever. If we consider other sci-fi universes such as Firefly, Star Trek, Star Wars, or Warhammer 40k, each is distinct and occupies a sturdy location on the spectrum of intensity. 40k, for example, is notoriously dark and grim, characteristics that anchor its tone, catering to the depths of potential depravity inside each of us. Its fundamental premise is unending, unimaginable war being propagated by a functional vampire of an empire, stealing the lives of several thousands each day, only to sustain a violent imperial religion he once fought so hard to quench. The extremes venture in every direction, with ferocious intensity, and it's this velocity that helps capture its fan base. Star Wars, on the other hand, is lighter in tone, whimsical, and more childlike. While not glossing over themes such as fascism or the ethics of a so-called righteous war, its approach is softer, comforted with humor, and playful. Even the colors of soldiers' weapons remind viewers of the holidays. Similarly, Lord of the Rings is a grounded, even realistic fantasy that's immediately relatable, in which the fantastic is possible, although rarely experienced. Anarchy Online, on the other hand, only leans in the dark, with still keeping a foot in the light. Unfortunately, this applies to many of its systems. While its artistic tone is relatively foreboding, it does not have the same push-pull reaction of Warhammer 40k, and its attempt to lighten the mood was met with mixed reception, as when Shadowlands, its first expansion, was seen as a departure from a gritty sci-fi to a lighter fantasy genre. Of course, as MMOs mature, they evolve, which is to be expected. Yet it's easier as a consumer to wrap your head around a cat than a platypus. In other words, instead of exploring the liminal, which is an essential zone in a typical hero's journey, Anarchy Online too quickly changed categories. The transition is only meaningful if there's a Lydian intermediary period, in which the former makes room for the latter. This type of problem extends to combat too. While I personally enjoy PvE in Anarchy Online, I also recognize that it's not as punchy as EverQuest's simpler yet more dramatic model, nor is it as fluid or easy to understand as vanilla WoW. Since consumers have to play a zero-sum game when it comes to playing MMOs, in that the time spent in one MMO is not spent in another, unless that title supports some degree of AFK playing. We often gravitate to what is better, even if it's marginal. So, while fighting is fun in Anarchy Online, it isn't the best at what it has tried to accomplish. This is admittedly a subjective opinion, as others are free to disagree. Yet I think the proof is in the pudding. As mentioned earlier, what Anarchy Online did best was its customization model, yet its complexity and complication filtered out too many potential players. On a lesser yet still relevant note, Star Trek Online, Star Wars Galaxies, Star Wars The Old Republic, and EVE Online also have included space travel, which is an iconic feature of any sci-fi world. Oddly, no such feature exists in Anarchy Online. While likely a minor point in the scheme of things, it does beg the question. It's as if developing a game in the Wild West without horses. This type of potential misdirection goes further. There's a subtle reason why my series tentatively ends after the subway dungeon, preceding the newbie tutorial. The next stage of leveling is difficult to access unless you're helped by another player or an outside resource, which means the game does a poor job recommending where to go next. The subterranean dungeon is right in front of players immediately after the newbie area. The following zone, the Temple of the Three Winds, requires finding a hidden NPC, then completing a several stage quest, and then clicking a seemingly random picture in an inconspicuous shipping container to enter. This is the complication cost appearing again in another gameplay sector. While I appreciate the lore and the story building of gaining access to the temple, the game design is terrible. Imagine having to turn in orc belts before even entering Crushbone without any guidance. Of course, helpful players have bridged the gap, but more solo-oriented players would not have had a similar experience. Gating content should follow Stardew Valley's approach, in which content is teased to the player who eventually and naturally discover how to engage. With all that said, others still feel that Anarchy Online is the best sci-fi MMORPG ever made. I can see why some players continue to call it home due to its complexity, dark tone, and unique systems, while also understanding why others have left, either due to its lack of proper liminality, the cumbersome details of its skill and equipment system, or feeling like you can't compete fairly due to hacking. Not to mention the increased competition from other MMOs, as Funcom invested fewer and fewer resources into Anarchy Online. Be that as it may, I had more challenging PvE and more cooperative gameplay in my time in Anarchy Online than I did Flying Dragons in WoW. Yeah, so Guild Wars 2's Griffin is better. Let me know what you think in the comments and whether Anarchy Online is the best sci-fi MMO. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more MMO content.